there. The main difference here is that slash on the back, which I've heard mixed feelings on. I didn't think I'd like it at first, but after playing around with the lighting effects on it, I actually found myself sort of digging it. I like Anime Matrix 2 though, so I don't really have a strong preference here. I just think future models, maybe they can make it a little more subtle looking. The 2024 models also introduced an even larger touchpad, which looks and feels great as it's glass just like last year's, and the G16 comes in slightly bigger since it has more space to work with. They each get a flush glass bezel from the glossy OLED display, which I think looks extremely pleasing to the eye compared to your typical lifted plastic bezels like on the 2023 models. The keycaps are also larger on the 2024 ones, making for an even more comfortable typing experience.
Anduin versus Scarlet!
Who wants to play?
Light makes right.
And again, we cannot ignore the weight and dimensions of these laptops. We are talking thinner and lighter than their MacBook Pro counterparts, and nearly as thin and light as a MacBook Air. That is simply unheard of in the world of gaming laptops. Like, people love to compare these for some reason to like the Lenovo Legion Pro and even the Blade 16. It's really hard to compare to because these are so much thinner. Like, these are essentially gaming ultrabooks at this point, but with much more power and surprisingly decent fans and temperatures, which we'll get to that as well. Also, some early reviews complained about the screen wobble, and I really didn't find it to be an issue at all, as well as a bunch of people that I talked to. A lot of people on Reddit posted that it's just fine. It's kind of average, maybe like a tiny bit more wobbly than your average gaming laptop, but I wouldn't say it feels bad. So I have a laptop speaker test that you might have already seen from my G16 review, but I want to play that here as I think it really helps demonstrate just how amazing these speakers are on the 2024 models. They are without a doubt the best laptop speakers I've ever heard, and nothing I've heard has even come close. I thought the 2023 G14 sounded good, but these blow that one out of the water. So they sound nearly identical to each other with just some slight differences in EQ, which you might pick up on here.
Laptop speakers sound good. Do they sound the way that they should? Which one do you think sounds best in this laptop speaker test? Laptop speakers, they better ever in the air. These laptop speakers sound so loud and clear. Can you hear the noise? Did your eardrums get destroyed by these laptop speakers? Yeah, they're playing for you.
Alright, if you dig that speaker test, hit that subscribe button. I'm really trying to differentiate from the average tech reviewer and push a more researched review style forward, getting the community involved in the process with future videos, so any support towards that goal is greatly appreciated. Now let's talk fan noise. This is huge for me. This is another one you might have seen in my G16 review, but I have measurements for all three of these laptops. Overall, here's my take. They all have great fan tuning and really aren't annoyingly loud. I know the stereotype out there is that thinner gaming laptops always have louder fans, but personally, I've had and tested bigger, thicker laptops that have louder fans than all of these. Every MSI laptop, for example, that I've tried has been louder. And if you're coming from Acer, then that's another one that's definitely louder than these. Even the Lenovo Legion Pro 7i, which is much thicker and heavier than all of these, will push nearly 50 decibels or more in its turbo mode, so that's just kind of standard. But yeah, let's start with the 2024 G14. So to me, my ears perceive this one as being the quietest of the three in all power modes, especially the silent mode though. It has the quietest silent mode to my ears at least. Even though the decibels seem about the same, the three fan design stays off or virtually imperceivable when it's in silent mode while doing basic tasks. Even when gaming though, the silent mode is very respectable for how quiet it is. The 2023 G14 is largely the same, although it has two fans and a vapor chamber instead. So nearly always off or super low RPM in silent mode, and one of the best silent performers out there, which I'll show benchmarks for in a second. The G16 is the oddball of the bunch, having both of these fan designs depending on the model that you get. The 4080 and 4090 model have a two-fan design with a vapor chamber, which keeps noise in check extremely well. I'd say just about on par with last year's G14 and most other gaming laptops out there. The G16, I'd say, even though it's only hitting 47 decibels here in turbo mode measured, I think it sounds pretty on par with the 2023 G14, but maybe with a slightly higher pitch, just slightly. The three-fan model of the G16, which is your 4060 and 4070, that one's not bad either. You can basically throw out anything that earlier reviews said about this model model, as recent BIOS updates have improved the fan noise considerably here. For example, Just Josh acknowledges this in his 2024 laptop roundup, that his G16 even is a lot quieter now than when he first reviewed it. Basically, everyone now agrees that the silent mode is essentially 0 RPM or super low RPM, and even turbo mode is only like 1 to 2 decibels louder than the vapor chamber model. So I think most people will be very happy with all of these as far as fan noise goes. They have some of the quietest and highest performing silent modes out there, great performing balanced modes, and turbo modes that are on par with essentially every other gaming laptop. But spoiler alert, turbo mode might come off as loud if you've never had a gaming laptop before, especially if you're coming from a MacBook. That's just how these are all built. So until the next revolution in cooling comes our way, you're always going to be near 50 decibels. I have the fan noise to graphics score ratio chart here to prove my point even further. This is data I've collected on all of these laptops that shows you how many graphics points you get per decibel of fan noise in 3D Mark TimeSpy. So basically how much GPU performance you can expect for each decibel. Higher of course being better, with a bias towards laptops that have a higher power GPU. So just keep that in mind. 2024 G16 does extremely well here, beating out thicker and more powerful gaming laptops in its balanced and silent mode, as does the 2023 G14. The 2024 G14 is harder to compare, of course, because of the GPU performance bias from those 4090s, but if you look at it compared to other laptops, it still scores amazingly well. And we'll look at gaming benchmarks in a second that nail that point even further. Next, we're going to cover thermals, and this is where a lot of misinformation lies with these laptops. I see so many posts saying these laptops have poor thermals, or they saw a review that said it had bad thermals. Like, they don't. These laptops have great thermals, especially for their size. And I gotta say thanks to my buddy Michael for coming by and letting me use his 4070 G14 from last year. So I think that kind of helps add to the results a little bit, because that 4070 has a smaller die size, which means it will run a little bit warmer than the 4080 and 4090 models. So we can see how that affects things versus the 4090 G14. So we're gonna go over the 3 major power profiles on each laptop, starting with turbo mode GPU bound. So both 4090 laptops honestly get about the same temps and wattage here. Of course, you can get that extra 10 watts out of the G16 through Armory Crate's manual mode or G-Helper, which will add a few degrees to your GPU. Our 4070 models, the new one obviously only goes up to 90 watts, but it'll push a little bit past that sometimes. One funny thing is when you're GPU bound on the new G14, that CPU stays ice cold. I mean, it's only running at 10 watts, but it's still hitting 2500 megahertz, the same clock speed, so you're basically getting around the same performance at lower temps. But yeah, both 4070s are going to hit a little bit higher temps due to the smaller die size. When you're CPU bound in turbo mode, things get a little interesting. Last year's G14 actually gets a little more wattage than this year's G16 on the CPU in this scenario. I don't know what was up with my buddy's 4070 G14 here, but that thing was actually almost pushing out too much wattage when CPU bound. We're getting 95 to 100 watts, even more than the 4090 G14, which is definitely pushing temperatures up. So I'd almost recommend to 2023 owners just to limit your CPU wattage a little bit if you're on the 4060 and 4070 models. The 2024 G14 maintains a bit cooler of a CPU than last year's, even around the same wattage and clock speed, which is impressive. Although, of course, that GPU is running way lower, so that's also a contributing factor. Now, if we're in balanced mode and we're GPU bound, both 4090 models are, again, pretty close here, staying around the mid-70s for temperature on the CPU and GPU, with a tiny bit more GPU wattage going to the G14. And then if we're looking at the 4070 G14s, the 2024 model is getting about 25 watts less on the GPU while running at similar temps, which is why last year's G14 tends to win here in balanced mode. Now, if we're CPU bound, I forgot to record the new G14 and CPU bound in this scenario, but it's funny to me that last year's G14, the 4070 model, prioritizes CPU a little bit more, while the 4090 prioritizes GPU a little bit more when CPU bound. But both the 4090 G16 and 4090 G14 are, again, about the same here, with the G14 just running slightly warmer. But still, though, these are not bad temps at all, especially for how thin these machines are. All right, now silent mode, yeah, is a little little different. Okay, so for comparing G16 4090 to G14 4090, you're looking at a tiny bit more CPU wattage going to the G14 when we're GPU bound, but the temps are roughly the same. And then if we're looking at 4070 models, the 2024 G14 is about 20 watts less on the GPU and about 15 watts less on the CPU, and it's running very cool here in the 60s in silent mode, while the 2023 G14 stays in the mid 70s in temperatures. And being CPU bound helps a lot for silent mode. So now, again, you can see the temperatures are pretty similar with the G14 4090 and G16 4090, similar performance as well. This is another one I forgot to capture on the 2024 G14, but last year's G14 4070 is about the same as it was GPU bound. It's just when you're in silent mode, letting the CPU take priority just helps a ton here. And this is the stock Armory Crate silent mode, which actually is not very good. So luckily we have a little thing called G Helper where you can make just very basic tweaks. What I typically do is just raise the default silent mode's fans just a couple hundred RPM, which is barely noticeable at all, and then apply a really low CPU power limit or disable turbo boost on the AMD models, lower dynamic boost all the way, and now all of a sudden you're getting maybe slightly higher temps but way more performance, and that will just about triple or quadruple your FPS in games from the stock silent mode with barely audible fans. The 2024 G14 in particular, I couldn't even hear the fans over the speakers, and I only had the speakers at like 15% volume. So overall, I'm super impressed with the thermals on these things. Yes, sometimes the GPU can get a bit warm on these guys, especially last year's 4070 G14, but that's just because that 4070 and 4060 are smaller die sizes, so they tend to run a little bit warm, but nothing to be concerned about. They're not throttling like crazy. They're still getting the full performance that you should expect from that GPU without the chassis burning your hands or anything. So really impressive. I wouldn't really even say that there's a clear winner here. I just think all of them perform pretty well for the size of their chassis, and they're all tuned really well. You know, maybe it's just certain scenarios that one might do better than the other, like a balance mode that's GPU bound or a silent mode that's CPU bound. So to me, there's no clear winner here. They're all just